Do we want to be the exception to the rule? Do we want to be outside of the rules and take shortcuts and say, well, that doesn't apply to me. I don't have to do that. Or are we striving to be exceptional, trying to reach that bar, to lift our eyes up higher? In this gospel today, the part that jumps out to me the most is not just Christ's teaching on marriage, and when they ask him about divorce, he enforces it even more. What he's saying, what God has joined together, let no one separate, the two become one flesh. That's the exceptional calling of marriage. But the part that often stands out is this one line that we have to make sure that we get right. He says, "And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for unchastity and marries another commits adultery." What does he mean by that, right? Is he saying that, well, if there's unchastity, then okay, you can divorce, you're free, everything's okay, all this stuff that I just said, it doesn't apply? That doesn't seem to be the case, right? That's not what the teaching of the church is. This isn't an accept clause that as long as there's unchastity, then you're free. You can divorce your wife and it's no big deal. But rather, it seems the interpretation, what Catholic commentators say, is that except for unchastity, what he actually means and what he's saying are possibly two things. The first one, there's two things. And I forget the first one, and it's the best one. Anyway, the second one was that if the marriage was unlawful, that if it was an unlawful marriage, if it was never a marriage in the first place, and that's what we believe about annulments, then that marriage doesn't exist, right? And they would be free to marry someone else. And in the first case, the other, except for unchastity, meaning that if there was adultery in the marriage, that sometimes spouses can't reconcile, they can't reunite. And so it would be acceptable for them to live apart, not to marry again, but to live apart. And so my main point in bringing this up and pointing this is that it can seem like it's an exception, and it's a dangerous thing for any married couple to try to live their marriage by exceptions, right? They're not going to be reaching and striving for all that they could be. And in a similar way for celibacy, which our Lord talks about as well. It'd be a terrible thing for a priest or for a sister to live their vocation looking for the exception, right? Looking for where can I cut the corner? Where can I take a shortcut? But rather we want to reach as high as we can for this great and lofty mission that Christ gives in marriage and in holy celibacy. A great example that we have today of an exceptional saint is St. Maximilian Kolbe, right? When they went along and they missed over him, picking those who would die, he didn't think to himself, well, thank goodness, I'm the exception. I don't have to die. It's fine if that other person dies, but I'm the exception. But rather, he stepped forward and he was exceptional. And he stepped forward himself and said, let me take that man's spot. I will stand in his place. I will die in his place. And he did so and is one of our great martyrs and great witnesses to the faith. And so for us today, a good thing to think about. I don't want to be the exception. I don't want to take the shortcut, but I want to be exceptional. I want to reach the lofty goals that God has called me to in my vocation and in my faith.